4.5 to 4.6% decimals and fractions. I can convert between percents, decimals, and fractions.
Thank you, Ayana. Now, as you can see, we're using Ayana's notes. I appreciate the use of your notes, Ayana, since I don't have mine. Can you zoom in a little bit more, Ayana? Perfect. So looking at our vocab, are any of those vocab words new to you?
No.
Have you ever not heard of a fraction, a ratio, a decimal, or a percent? You've all heard of them?
Yes.
Remember, I want answers together? Okay, cool. So, Ayana, let's skip over vocab and let's go to number 2. And the main idea for number 2 is fractions to decimals, right? Everybody, how do you go from a fraction to a decimal? On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3.
Divide.
Okay, so the process uses division. And we have an example of division. You may also use a calculator to go from a fraction to a decimal. 1 divided by 2 equals?
0.5.
But we actually don't say 0.5, we say 5/10. And we know why in a second here. We'll know why, or we already know why, but we'll talk about it in a second. Okay, moving down to the second one. To go from a fraction to a percent, same thing, we have to divide, but after you divide, you do what?
Multiply by 100.
By 100. So we've already talked about 1/2 gives us 5/10. If we multiply that by 100, we now have our percentage, which is
50%.
50%. Now, Miss Miller also talked about a proportion. You guys just learned proportions yesterday, right? So if you have 1/2, and we want to know what the percentage is, percentages are based out of 100, we could set up a proportion and do our bubbles, and we would still get to 50%, right?
Yes.
Isn't that cool? So you can use proportions as well. I love. Okay, number 3. Slide on down, Ayana. How do you go from a percent to a, what is that, percent to fraction? Percent to a fraction. So the process to go from a percent to a fraction is to what on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3?
Read the percent sign as per 100.
So we would say 23% would be 23
Over 100.
per
Per
100, which is the same as 23 over 100, right?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Cool. Slide on. We're gonna ignore this part right here. I know you have that in your notes, but just forget about it. Slide on down. Did you skip one?
No.
Okay. What are we on? Percent to a decimal. So if we have 50% and we want to make it into a decimal, what do we do?
Divide by 100.
So what is 50 divided by 100?
50 hundredths.
50 hundredths, or it could also be 5/10. Okay. Decimals to fractions. You do what to go from a decimal to a fraction?
Read the decimal using place value.
That wasn't very good. Try it again in the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Read the decimal using place value.
So this is not our 0.5. We read that as,
5/10.
which reduces to,
1/2.
we read this as not 0.313, but we read it as,
313,000.
because what is this place value here?
Tens.
What is this one?
Hundred.
What is this one?
Thousand.
The last number is the place value used in your fractions, in the thousandths place. Okay, and then the last one, decimals to percents. The process is on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Multiply the decimal by 100.
So 5/10 multiplied by 100, which is the same as moving it how many spots?
2.
And what happens when you have a blank here? What do you put in there?
0.
And what is the percentage then?
50%.
Questions?